Welcome, 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 everybody. Let me first say a big thank you to those of you who made the time in your busy lives to come out tonight. And hopefully it won't be time wasted. There's a whole list of people I'd like to thank, and I'd really like to start with the head of our planning team, Bridget Liddy, who's over here in green off to my right. Thank you so much, Bridget and her team. And these are names you need to know, right? Because these are our City of Savannah employees and leaders who are helping usher these projects forward. She could not be here tonight, but I also wanted to thank Christy Lawrence. She is the interim senior director of our real estates and capital projects portfolio and her entire team. And let me also just say a huge thank you to all of the many City of Savannah employees who came out here tonight to talk to all of you, to hear from all of you, and to take down in great detail all of your feedback. So if we could please just give a round of applause to those hardworking employees. Thank you so much. I want to thank our business partners here in the city who are working very hard on this project: Sutil and Sutil, RCL Co., EDSA, Blue Knowledge, Ethos Preservation, Shedrick Coleman of Shed Architecture, and Symbiosity. Thank you so much to our partners. If we can give them a quick little round of applause as well. So I am the City of Savannah's new Chief Operating Officer. I am so privileged to get to join the city and live and work in such a wonderful, wonderful place like all of you. I will say this is a really special place. As you walk in the door and look to your left, you see that painting of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and you look to the right and you see what is and will be the greatest theater, music, and arts venue, I hope, in not only the Coastal Empire, but the entire region. And it's a really important space worth preserving. So I think here we are on this beautiful evening, looking to all of you to help us figure out what our next steps are in this space. We are doing a demolition of the arena that is connected to the Johnny Mercer Theater, as many of you know. That's going to be a very, very careful demolition, and it's going to start at the beginning of next calendar year, and it'll take about 9 months to complete. And it's going to be, when we say careful demolition, it's going to be a brick by brick demolition. And one of the reasons for that is we really are going to preserve this space, the Johnny Mercer Theater, for generations to come. And we have a brand new arena, as many of you may know, hopefully all of you know, right around the corner in Market Arena. And we have engaged with our business partners here to determine what to do with the space once our old arena here is fully demoed. And that's why we're here tonight, right? And we really want to hear from you all. And I will say, there is no predetermined outcome, right? And with all public engagement, we want, and this is very important to our equity principles here in the city, we want you all to help us determine what that future use should be. So we have a great group of folks here tonight. We have wonderful displays of the many options that we're looking at all around the room. And we're going to have some presentations that I think will help seat you all in how we came up with these options. And then at the end, we really want to re-engage with you in the walk around that we've created here for the public engagement. So we won't have comments as a part of the presentation because what we're trying to do here is something a little new. We want each of you to get the opportunity to talk to us, and not everybody's comfortable raising their hand and in the middle of a presentation or at the end. So we've really set up the engagement tonight so you can walk to each or any of the stations, provide your feedback directly to a city employee where it will be captured and used in the consideration of what the next steps are for the Civic Center Legacy site. I do want to say something here before I hand it off to our presenters, which is And many of you might not know this. I live in this world and I take it for granted, but we've actually recently engaged in an expansion of this study to include a larger 4-acre look at land use, community amenity use, that takes us from here all the way through to that arena. And I want you all to think of the city, our historic center, but also as you think, I want you to go home tonight and really think, how do we connect all the parts of our city? And how do we think about not just this site, but the land in between, the communities in between, the in-market arena, and our larger arts and entertainment footprint? So I really want you guys to think about that as well. But tonight, we're specifically here focused on what we should do with the space that really sits just a few feet behind us, where we're going to be demoing that old arena. So I will right now hand it off to a very dear partner of the city, someone who's actively engaged in this project and in the community writ large, Christian Sutil. So I'll ask him to come up to the stage now and he will take it away.
Okay.
And you may
Thank you, Sasha, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I'm going to say just a few remarks to provide a little context to the process that led us to where we are today, the input that we're asking for, and I'm going to pass it on to our team with RCLCO and EDSA in just a minute. But I wanted to provide some of that background first. A bit of history of the site in Savannah. You have to sort of go back to, in the beginning was the plan for Savannah, which really sits beneath everything that has happened in the center of the city over all these many centuries now. And I think many of you here know how sort of this old family recipe of Savannah works, but it's important if you're not familiar to understand the ward structure of Savannah, at least in the core of the city. It's the formula that city leaders used for over 150 years as they made the city bigger. And its basic module is this: a square in the middle. Then there are what are called tithing blocks, which are the longer blocks that are at the top and the bottom of the ward, and then the trust lots, which are the smaller blocks that face the square. And that basic urban structure is what allowed Savannah, it's really what gives Savannah its unique fingerprints in the world. And so the area that we're in right now is actually part of that old Savannah plan, or what's called the Oglethorpe plan. And there are two of those wards. One is Elbert, the other is the adjacent ward that has Orleans Square. That's what that area looked like, in early years, going back into the early 1800s. And photograph of Elbert Square at that time. This is on the west side of Savannah. The railroad complex was growing. There was a lot of housing being built in this area at that time. A lot of it was workforce housing. I don't know if we called it that back then, but that's what it was. And then, then the automobile came along. In the 1930s, we actually lost the center of 3 Savannah squares for Highway 17. The middle of Elbert Square and the middle of Liberty, middle of Franklin were all taken out. And then that's what that looked like at that time. And in fact, other changes were afoot. The old Civic Auditorium was built facing Orleans Square just beyond the window. In fact, if we looked out the window here, you would see the rooftop of that building. That was lost as well when this complex was built. But that was built in the early 1900s and supported life in Savannah for all of that time. In fact, this was a photograph of Dr. King addressing Savannians in the 1960s in the old Civic Auditorium that was later removed. This is a photograph of Old Liberty Street in earlier years, and you see a much more sort of bustling pedestrian life at that time. So the city's gone through many changes. This is a snapshot or an X-ray in the 1950s and how that would change 50 years later to the complex that we have today. So this process of the last 2 years now has taken close stock of the landscape of this area, the area that specifically encompasses the Civic Center complex. And it was noted through all the work that it's actually 2 buildings. The arena is a separate structure from the theater. And so the plan that the city council adopted to move forward with last year is this, which is a restoration of 6 of those original city blocks of the old Savannah plan, and then a restoration, renovation of the theater for another generation of the performing arts here in Savannah. So that's the plan in total. In June of 2024, the mayor and the aldermen voted to proceed with removal of the arena and a full renovation of the theater, including the ballroom, the space we're in tonight, as well as the community meeting rooms. So that council resolution was passed. I want to read just some of the highlights there that are important, because this is the marching orders for everyone on the city staff and everyone on the team. Point number 1 is to achieve an equitable approach to redeveloping this area, retaining the name and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., restoring as much of the Oglethorpe plan as feasible, prioritizing housing, including affordable and workforce housing, prohibiting the development of new hotels, and restricting the use of short-term vacation rentals, optimizing space for public and municipal use, as well as appropriate retail and commercial spaces, and achieving future parking needs. So these are from that council resolution, but the key points that are part of that resolution. So in moving forward with this work, what the city has done is taken that whole area and separated it into 2 sub areas. Area A, which you can see on the map there, which includes the theater, ballrooms, the meeting rooms, a new multi-use space that the city proposes to build as a part of that block, and also reimagining and working on bringing Elbert Square back. So that is being referred to as the Civic block. The area that's highlighted in blue there, Area B, is what's being referred to as the Oglethorpe plan blocks, which are restoring the original street grid of the city and looking at how those blocks could be redeveloped. So if you take that larger redevelopment plan, you can separate it into those 2 areas. Important for tonight is we're here to talk about Area B. Area B. Area A is very important too, and there will be other opportunities to get together as a community to talk about the theater and the restoration of that block, the reinvestment in that civic facility. But Area B is the restoration of the city blocks. So that's Area A. Area B is restoring the original blocks of the city plan that we just talked about. So that's what our economic research team has been looking into. They've been studying viable options for how those blocks could be put back into service. And you're going to hear more about that in just a minute. But the one point I wanted to make is that the gift we have here in Savannah is that the city plan is very modular, meaning you can put many different things into it. We have been for about 300 years now. So as we look at these ideas, you're not voting on any one specific thing tonight, but providing preferences, right? I think I'd like to see things more like this or more like that. The plan is very flexible. The plan is very accommodating, and its basic bone structure allows, in fact, this is what it looked like back in the 1730s. There's a bank building on that corner today, but the lot hasn't moved an inch that whole time. So the beauty of the Savannah plan is it allows change over time. Those blocks accommodate many different kinds of buildings, and our ordinance is set up to ensure that the buildings that are brought in are designed to work within the plan. So all the buildings we see throughout Savannah, whether they're on trust lots or tithing lots, are all part of the DNA, you might say, the DNA of the Savannah plan. So whether you see grand buildings or humbler buildings, they're all part of the Savannah plan. This is in fact one building that used to be on one of the blocks just outside this building, the Archibald Bullock House on Orleans Square, that unfortunately was lost. But again, an example of how this plan works. So these are the 6 blocks that we are going to be talking about. I'm going to turn it over to Jacob Ross with RC Elco, our economic experts, to sort of set the framework for tonight's input. So come on up, Jake.
Thank you, Christian. Um, nice to see everyone tonight. My name is Jacob Ross. I'm a principal at RC Elco. We're a real estate advisory firm. And as Christian said, we're helping to lead the economic and land use study with support from EDSA, who you'll hear from in a minute. As we start with why we're here today, we wanted to give you an overview of our process and some of the things that we see going into an economic and land use study. On one hand, you've got the market, what there's demand for, what the market conditions say. You have the financial conditions, what's viable, what's feasible for a developer to build. You've got the economic returns, economic realities of what this stands to generate for the city and for the community. You've got the physical conditions in the context of this plan, what is possible. And then lastly, but certainly not least, you have you, the community. And we want to make sure that we're not just thinking about this in terms of numbers analysis, but also it's grounded in real world feedback from the people that are going to interact with the site on a daily basis once this has delivered. And so if we start thinking about this just purely from a market opportunity, it's not every day when you come across a site like this. This is a large site in a historic district in an unbelievably unique city right next to a theater. Those are just a couple of the things going for it and why we see this and why we think the development community, when it comes time to try to find partners for this site, will see this as an attractive opportunity. And as we're thinking about who this development is going to serve, we're thinking about a variety of uses. From a housing perspective, we're thinking about, we know prioritizing housing is an emphasis. We know equity is an emphasis. And so we're trying to think about a variety of age segments, income segments that can be served by product at the site. But at the same time, we also know that even if you don't wind up living in one of these units, you still have opportunities to interact with the site. And so we're thinking about the places where people can shop, where people can eat, where people can work, and interact with the site in other ways too. And so as we think about the uses that we studied in our market and financial analysis and where we really saw the strongest opportunities, we've kind of categorized them. This first bucket that we have here is what we're calling our special cases, the large multi-tenant office and affordable rental apartments. These are uses that stand alone, we think, really need to have the right conditions in order to be built, operated, and succeed. In the case of larger multi-tenant office, you need an anchor tenant that can fill a large portion of that space. In the case of affordable housing, and when I say affordable, I'm really thinking income restricted at levels of 60% of AMI and below. In order to do a standalone building, you really need federal tax credits to help support it, which can be competitive, can be challenging to get for a number of reasons. That's not to say there aren't opportunities to incorporate affordable at those levels within the context of other buildings, but standalone really requires the right conditions to succeed. And so for the purpose of this plan, you'll see the scenarios that we're laying out. We're largely focusing on these other three buckets, which we see as much more likely that if the city tries to seek development partners to come in, it would be met with strong interest. And so the second bucket that we have here are what we're calling possible opportunities, the workforce rental apartments, smaller offices. These aren't things that necessarily are going to generate tons of revenue to the city, but we still think are feasible for someone to come in and build and operate and could definitely play a role in this site. You've also got what we say are strong options, a variety of forms of rental housing, market rate apartments, market rate townhomes, seniors housing, student housing, retail also. Uses that by nature of the historic district maybe aren't delivering everywhere today, but we see as strong possibilities and strong opportunities. And then lastly, for sale condos, for sale townhomes, uses that we know are feasible here because we see them delivering. And so, like I said, that leaves us with a variety of types of housing as we think about that prioritized housing goal that Christian mentioned earlier in his part of the presentation. And that leaves us with a lot of different potential opportunities, both rental and for sale, and lots of different age and income ranges that can be served here. And we've included some examples of existing buildings in the historic district today that can help show these are uses that are in the city today and could play a role in this site as well. If you haven't had the chance to make your way around the boards just yet, you'll see these sliders as you go around the room, which is meant to illustrate that each of these uses, these types of housing, responds to different priorities when it comes to the affordability of the units that they contain, the density of the buildings, the height of the buildings, how quickly it would take for the market to build or for them to be absorbed by future buyers or renters of the buildings. And so this is a framework you'll see throughout the presentation and as in the boards as you go around, is different scenarios are meant to weigh different priorities. These are just a couple of some of those examples that we're seeing in our analysis as far as things that we're considering as we're putting together potential scenarios for how this site could be built. You know, one example is we see that in order to build most forms of rental housing, whether you're talking about market rate apartments or workforce rental apartments, you really need to be able to get to a certain scale of building, whether that's from density or whether that's from height. And so we see some push and pull between those factors and affordability. And then conversely, we also see, you know, if you're focusing, this is a big site. And so if you focus a lot of the site on one or two particular product types at high price points, it's likely going to take longer for the market to be able to absorb that product just because there's fewer buyers and renters who might be served by it. And so these are just some examples of some of those priorities that we're asking people to respond to with some of these sliders, but they're also how we're thinking about some of the scenarios that we've put together that Kona from EDSA, who I'm about to hand off to, can speak to as he presents some of the scenarios.
Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah. How are you all doing? Pretty good. We're almost there. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I have to re-emphasize how much we appreciate you coming out to see us. This really matters in the work we do. Uninformed design is just that, uninformed design. So it's really great to have you involved with this process. So everything you're going to see here in terms of those scenarios are also driven by the market. They're feasible. They also work within the guidelines of the city, and they are also by right. So we're not asking for anything extra that is not allowed already. Also, as was stated before, each one of these scenarios are just ideas. They're parts of the recipe, the development recipe, as you call it, right, Christian? That'll allow us to come up with ideas that can move forward, right? And we're not asking you to choose one. So I'm just going to walk through them. And then most of you have already seen them. If you haven't seen them yet, you'll have more time to study them further. That way. All right. So how to understand this? This is the first step. So the first step when you're looking at these maps is they identify the 6 blocks that we're looking at. And so that's what you'll see in the first sort of diagram to the left. A little bit further over, you're going to see the percentages, a ratio of different types of housing, different types of commercial. And then it was mentioned before, you're going to see the slider, the bars on the bottom that will ask you to determine, do you want a little bit more or do you want a little bit less? And all those have different effects in terms of the opportunities. Scenario 1 that you probably have already seen, most of you have studied this a little bit already. This scenario is based on going with more of a for sale product, right? For sale condominiums as well as row houses, that type of development. So you'll see that the density is lower as you go across the scale, but we also have the sort of affordability is also lower in this case. What we think is also important is to understand sort of the density, the heights, as well as the time to build. Time to build will be a little bit longer in this type of scenario. And then also down here, you can see the pie chart that shows you the type of development that we're proposing here. Again, this is just a scenario. Scenario 2 gives us a little bit more opportunity to bring in a little bit more density, also to have product that is for rent, more leasable product. And so that changes the dynamics quite a bit. And you'll see that we're introducing different types of products in this, as well as apartments and also workforce housing in this one as well. Go down the scale again and you'll see from the ability to have something that's a little bit more affordable. Now we're sliding a little bit more towards the center. We're also starting to see the heights get a little bit higher as well. The density is also sliding a little bit more towards the center. And of course, down at the bottom, time to build does increase. It gets a little bit faster to deliver this type of product scenario. And again, all of this these are all parts of the recipe. These are all different ingredients. The third scenario actually takes it a little step further. We're introducing additional types of development. We're introducing senior housing. We still have the apartments. You'll see that we don't have any for sale product here. But again, this is something that can be blended into all the different ways we do it. Look at the metrics. So affordability starts to slide all the way to the right. Gets a little bit better. The heights get higher because you need to have more density in order to have more affordability. Same with the density, and then you can see the time to build. You can do it in less time. Now, commercial. Did you all make it to table number 8? Everybody made it there? So the idea here with the commercial is each one of the scenarios we showed you earlier have an overlay or underlay of commercial. We're really looking at how to improve the public realm to have more opportunity for street side cafes and that type of ability to shine a light on our environment here in Savannah. And so you'll see what we intentionally did was we pulled a lot of the commercial closer to the theater and closer to Montgomery. That was intentional. Imagine if you're going to the theater and you want to have dinner before you go to the theater. It's a lot more convenient to park and go have dinner and then go to the theater. There's also different types. We have a street level office in this scenario. We have multi-story office in this scenario. And we're also showing that we have street level retail in this as well, commercial retail. And that commercial retail is a mix, right? It's not one type. So you could have some smaller boutiques. You could also have pharmacy. You could have, convenience store, restaurants, of course, maybe a small grocer. So we looked at all of those driven by what is essentially going to work within the market. All right, this is everything all combined. And you can see that there are several different ways that we can make this cake or make this recipe. All of them give us a lot of flexibility in terms of the market. And really what we're looking for here from you is just your thoughts on, what do you think are the most important priorities for us to consider as we move along? All right, next step, engagement. I love doing this. It's probably one of the most important parts of our work. You all received these coming in, right? So you have basically a sheet that told you how to really walk through this. And then next you have a sheet, props here, the QR code. Next you have the survey, this sheet here that walks you through the survey, all the different elements. So we want to get your input on this. There's also a digital way to do it. That is just as helpful as well. And if you have friends that aren't here tonight and you want to send them the digital version, please do. And then finally you receive dots. Right, everybody got dots. You enjoy this exercise. So on tables 7 and 8 is where we were able to engage with you and allow you to share with us, do you feel we need less or more of this type of intervention? So, timeline, you haven't seen, here's where we are. So we kicked off this project in July and we've been working through this planning study, working very, very hard with the city and all of the partners on this. We've gone through development opportunity analysis and feasibility. We've also looked at the zoning and concept as it relates to what is allowed in this area. And we are here right now today in October looking at these scenarios. As we go forward, we're going to start to look at the implementation and also have an opportunity to come back and share what we heard from you and where we think the recommendations should be working into January. So it's a good, thorough process that's going to allow us to get to the point where we need to be in order for us to continue moving forward. So, as an overview for the engagement, this is what we're asking you to do, right? We're essentially asking you to help us identify the priorities. Real straightforward, very simple. We need to have this input. It makes it work. We want you to provide a feedback related to the housing, the retail, characteristics you're hoping to see, and certainly put that in the survey, and we'll use that information to move forward. Because together, we're going to shape what this future is going to be through these different types of scenarios. And we certainly want to make sure that we ensure that this is all Savannah, right? We want to make sure this is very, very focused on Savannah and it feels like Savannah when we're all done. Again, grab the QR code, explore the boards, use your docs, share your ideas, fill out the feedback cards, certainly, and scan the code for others who couldn't be here, right? And make sure they get and receive it. And so if you haven't made it around to all the areas, we have some time left, and that's what this time is for. And please ask us lots of questions. Go to the table stations that you haven't been to yet, and we'll continue forward. And that's all we have. Thank you.